If you told me a year ago that I'd end up filing a restraining order against my own mother, I would have laughed. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe deep down, I always knew something was off. My name's Jake. I'm 39 years old, a high school biology teacher, and a new dad to the most perfect baby boy I've ever laid eyes on. My wife, Lila, and I have been trying for years. Miscarriages, surgeries, tears in hospital parking lots. And then, finally, our son, Benjamin, was born on a rainy Tuesday morning in Missoula. We thought our family would be thrilled. And at first, they were. Or, at least, they played the part well. Balloons. Flowers. My mom cooing over him while my sister, Grace, gave him one obligatory kiss on the forehead before switching the conversation. No joke, to seating arrangements for her wedding that weekend. That was the first sign. Looking back, the clues were all there. The way my mom refused to hold him for more than a minute, saying he looked a little too much like Jake. The way she winced when my wife breastfed in the living room. How she always referred to the baby as that boy instead of his name. But I chalked it up to stress. Grace was getting married in 2 days, and my mom's never handled high emotion well. She's always been the type to make everyone else's life about her. I just didn't know she'd go as far as this. A few hours after we got home from the hospital, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me said do it. A woman's voice, shaky, professional, asked if I was Jacob Halvorsen, father of Benjamin Halvorsen. She said she was from a local adoption agency. That my son's case file had raised red flags. That something wasn't adding up with the mother's relinquishment form. I couldn't speak. I asked her to repeat herself. She apologized and said she wasn't supposed to say more until it was resolved through official channels. But I pressed. I don't know what part of my voice broke, but she finally told me. Someone claiming to be my son's legal guardian had submitted papers to place him up for private adoption. Faked ID, falsified medical clearance, signed documentation stating both biological parents had waived rights. I almost dropped the phone. That was the moment something in me cracked. Not like a branch, but like a dam. I didn't tell Lila right away. Not because I wanted to protect her. I was still trying to protect myself from the truth. My mother, the woman who once told me I was her miracle baby, who used to keep my baby shoes in a shadow box, had attempted to give my own child away. Without our consent. Without even telling us. So my wife, exhausted and nursing, still recovering from labor, sat on the couch and smiled when I brought her tea, unaware that our lives were starting to unravel behind her. But I started digging. I called the adoption agency back and told them to hold everything. They were already one step ahead. The woman I'd spoken to had flagged the application as suspicious and submitted a fraud report to the state. She couldn't say it outright, but she implied they knew exactly who had submitted the forms. The name on the guardian paperwork? Susan Halvorsen, my mom. And the kicker? She'd used Lila's maiden name to sign the birth mother's portion. I drove to her house that night, left the baby with Lila's sister, and drove like my knuckles were fused to the wheel. My mom opened the door like she was expecting me, all dressed up in pearls and a silk blouse like she was hosting brunch. My dad, always the quiet coward, just hovered in the kitchen, sipping coffee like this wasn't the end of the world. She acted shocked at first, tried to deny it, said I must have misunderstood, said paperwork gets confusing sometimes, and she was just helping. Helping who, I asked, because it sure as hell wasn't us. Eventually, the mask cracked. She folded her arms and said I was being selfish, that it was not the right time to bring a baby into the family dynamic, meaning Grace's wedding, that she had worked so hard to make this weekend perfect for her only daughter, and that the new baby smell was becoming a distraction. That's when I understood the full scope of her sickness. She wasn't just trying to control the spotlight. She wanted my son gone, out of sight, out of mind, to keep everything neat and presentable for the country club crowd who'd flown in for Grace's special day. My mother, the same woman who cried at diaper commercials, forged state documents, and nearly committed a felony because she didn't want our baby to interfere with her party. The next day was Grace's wedding rehearsal. I showed up with the baby in a carrier strapped to my chest and the paperwork in my back pocket. Not for drama, but because I knew she'd be there, and I wanted her to see what our mother had tried to erase. I wasn't planning on saying anything, not really. But Grace cornered me before the minister even opened his mouth. She was wearing a white silk robe and that dead-eyed grin brides get when the pressure starts to crack their polish. She asked if I really had to bring the baby. Said she thought I was respecting the tone of the event. The tone? That's when I realized she knew. Maybe not the whole story, but enough. Enough to see what mom had done and still decide the biggest issue was that my son's cooing might drown out the string quartet. I asked her flat out how much she knew. She just said that Mom was under a lot of stress and that it was better not to dig things up, that she needed this weekend to go smoothly. I stood there, rocking my baby back and forth, while my sister made it clear that she didn't care what happened. Not as long as the champagne was cold and the guests were happy. That's when it all clicked. The lie wasn't just my mom's. Grace was in on it, too. When I got home that night, I opened my laptop and started typing. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. But I did report what happened to the agency formally and emailed a lawyer a friend had recommended. It turns out falsifying state documents, forging parental consent, and attempting to deceive a licensed adoption agency, that's not just shady, it's criminal. And the agency didn't want to be involved in anything that even smelled like that kind of mess. The fallout began faster than I expected. The next morning, I got a call from Child and Family Services. They were already investigating. My mother's name had triggered an alert. This wasn't her first time meddling in someone else's parental rights. Yeah, that's right. I didn't know it then, but this wasn't her first attempt. The call from Child and Family Services shook something loose in me. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. I'd pace the hallway with Benjamin at 2 a.m., just walking him in circles while that voice echoed in my head. This wasn't her first time. I called the agent back the next day. She couldn't give me everything, confidentiality, privacy laws, but what she could tell me was enough to set my heart on fire. Years ago, long before I met Lila, my mom had been listed in a flagged inquiry. A former foster child, early 2000s. A girl who'd stayed with my parents for less than a month before suddenly being moved. On paper, it was listed as incompatibility. But off the record, there were concerns. Manipulation. Coercion. A forced visit to a doctor the girl hadn't consented to. The placement agency never filed charges, but they made sure she was never placed again. I didn't remember that girl. I was 13 at the time and caught up in my own little world of baseball games and braces. But now I couldn't stop wondering what I'd missed. What kind of damage my mom had done before Benjamin ever came into the picture. And that's when it got worse. 3 days after the wedding, which, by the way, I didn't attend, I got a call from a private investigator. Not one I hired. One my sister had hired. Apparently, Grace was convinced I was trying to destroy Mom's reputation out of jealousy. She didn't believe what the agency had found. She believed I had planted it. She told the PI that I was emotionally unstable and obsessed with making everything about me. Lila answered the phone that time. I was changing the baby when she walked into the nursery with that tight, shaking look on her face. I asked what was wrong. She just said, "Your family is trying to take our child away again." After that call, something in me hardened. Whatever doubt I had left, whatever childhood loyalty still lingered in the corners of my mind, it was gone. You don't accidentally try to erase someone's child from their life. And you sure as hell don't double down once you've been caught. The next morning, I sat down with Lila, poured us both some strong coffee, and told her I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. And I meant it. We filed a civil suit the following week. Fraud, emotional distress, attempted custodial interference, the works. I'll never forget the look on the courthouse clerk's face when she read through the paperwork and realized it involved forged adoption documents. Her eyes flicked up at me, and she just said, "This is going to get ugly." I nodded. It already was. Grace sent a barrage of texts that night. I didn't respond. She said I was ruining our family, that Mom might go to jail, that her wedding was overshadowed by my petty revenge campaign. I didn't bother explaining that this wasn't revenge. It was protection, and not just for me, for Benjamin, for Lila, for any child who might ever end up within arm's reach of my mother again. The trial moved fast, faster than we expected. Maybe because the evidence was so airtight. Maybe because the agency had already started their own internal report. My mother's forged signature, fake ID, and falsified hospital discharge forms were like a flaming trail of gasoline. My lawyer, sharp, calm, the type who doesn't blink even when the other side yells, looked me dead in the eye and said, "She's going down for this." And she did. Convicted. No jail time. She's older, has no prior record, but she's now legally prohibited from having contact with my son. The judge called her actions morally reprehensible and a gross violation of trust. Grace didn't come to the hearing. She sent a voicemail instead, saying I had humiliated our mother in public and that I had ruined her marriage. Apparently, her new in-laws weren't too thrilled about having a convicted felon in the bridal photos. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the voicemail to my lawyer for the file. 3 weeks after the verdict, we packed up everything that mattered. Benjamin's clothes, our photo albums, Lila's art supplies, and the last remnants of a life I no longer recognized. I gave notice at work, pulled our names from the church directory, and told exactly 4 people where we were going. The fewer who knew, the better. We moved to a small town 3 hours north. Not far, but far enough to start clean. Lila found a spot with a view of the river, tucked into a quiet street lined with maple trees. The kind of place where people wave from porches and nobody asks too many questions. It felt like exhaling after holding our breath for too long. The restraining order was granted a few days after the move. Standard distance, supervised contact if ever necessary, which it wouldn't be. We made sure of that. My lawyer said my mom was furious when she was served. Apparently, she screamed something about losing everything, which I found ironic since she nearly gave away everything that mattered to me. Grace texted again, just once. She said I was cruel, that I'd turned my back on the only family that ever cared. I read it, sat with it for maybe half a minute, then deleted the thread and blocked her number. Sometimes people like to weaponize nostalgia. They point to birthdays and Christmases and say, see, we were happy once. But I know now, memories aren't proof of love. They're just photographs of moments that survived the truth. And here's the truth. I didn't turn my back on my family. They turned their backs on my son. You know what surprised me the most? Nobody came. No dramatic doorstep confrontation. No teary-eyed mother begging forgiveness in the rain. Not even some half-hearted letter from Grace, scribbled in fake sorrow. Nothing. Just silence. And that silence said more than any apology ever could. It's not that they couldn't find us. Grace knew people. My mom had enough friends in town to shake a phone tree into full bloom. If they wanted to find us, they would have. But they didn't. And deep down, I knew why. Because if they acknowledged what happened, really looked in the face, they'd have to admit who she was. And what they let her become. Instead, they let the silence grow. Lila asked me one night, while we were folding laundry, if I thought I'd ever want to reconcile. I gave it some real thought. Stared at the soft onesie in my hands, warm from the dryer, the kind with the tiny dinosaurs he likes. And all I could say was no. Because even if I could forgive what she did, I can't forgive how quickly Grace decided it was easier to pretend nothing happened than to protect her nephew. That's what breaks me most. It's not just what they did, it's what they chose not to do. Some things die louder than others. Some ties rot quietly, like fruit left too long in a bowl. I think ours died the day I heard Benjamin giggle for the first time and realized they would never get to hear it. And I didn't feel sad. I felt safe. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. Postmarked from Helena, but that didn't narrow much down. Lila was the one who found it in the mailbox. Said it looked like junk, almost tossed it. But something about it made her pause and hand it to me. I opened it slowly, still half expecting glitter or venom. Instead, it was a letter. Typed. No signature. Just a single-page note with one sentence near the top underlined. I thought you should know what your mother said after court. The rest was a transcript. Someone had recorded it. Not officially, not in court, but in the hallway after the verdict. I don't know who sent it. Maybe a paralegal. Maybe someone from the agency who felt I deserved to hear it. Doesn't matter, because what I read in that letter made me sit down on the floor with Benjamin in my arms and just stare. She told someone, maybe Grace, maybe her lawyer, that she never really believed Benjamin was mine. That Lila had trapped me. That the baby was a manipulation tactic. That she had to fix things before it ruined Grace's moment. My hands were shaking. Benjamin was chewing on a plastic giraffe, completely unaware, his little eyes wide with wonder. She hadn't just tried to give him away. She convinced herself he didn't even belong in our lives. I don't know if that lie was something she made up in the moment or something she told herself so many times it calcified into truth. But either way, it shattered any last piece of doubt I had about cutting her off. She didn't just betray me. She erased me. It was a Thursday afternoon. Rainy, gray, the kind of day where everything feels a little heavier. Lila was upstairs trying to get Benjamin down for his nap. I was half asleep on the couch, coffee gone cold in my hands when someone knocked. I thought it was the delivery guy, maybe a neighbor. But when I opened the door, it was my father. I hadn't seen him since the hearing. He hadn't spoken to me, hadn't defended me. Not once. I told myself he was just being quiet to keep the peace. Now, looking at him, wet from the rain, holding his old baseball cap in both hands like it was a peace offering, I saw a man who'd picked silence over truth. And now he was here, standing on our porch, asking for something I didn't know. He didn't ask to come in, just stood there and said he'd been thinking about what happened, that he'd stayed out of it because he didn't want to make things worse. Worse. As if there was still a version of this where it could have gone worse. As if what she did was some family spat about a holiday menu and not a full-blown attempt to erase a child's identity. I didn't yell. I didn't invite him in. I just told him the truth, that by standing by and doing nothing, he'd made his choice. That silence is a choice. That there's a cost to letting someone burn down your house while you sit in the kitchen sipping tea. He nodded, didn't argue, just stood there for a while, rain soaking his sleeves, before he finally said, I miss my grandson. I didn't answer. He didn't get to miss what he never tried to protect. It came through email of all things. Not to me, to Lila. The subject line just said, for what it's worth. It was from Grace. I don't know if she knew I'd read it. Maybe she figured Lila wouldn't show me. Maybe she hoped she would. Either way, it was the first time my sister had said anything real since the whole thing started. She said she didn't know the full extent of what Mom had done, that she'd known something was off, but didn't want to admit it, that she thought I was just overreacting because I'd always had issues with Mom's control. She didn't apologize to me. Not directly. She said sorry to Lila for how uncomfortable everything must have been, for what this might have done to your marriage. Like I was some side character in my own life. At the end, she wrote, I wish Jake had handled things differently, but I understand now why he did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I don't hate him. I sat with that line for a long time. I don't hate him. Not I love him. Not he was right. Just that she doesn't hate me. I didn't reply. Lila didn't either. There wasn't anything left to say. Because here's the thing. Sometimes people think they're offering an olive branch, when really, they're just tossing a twig into a forest fire they helped start. It's been 7 months now. Benjamin took his first steps last week. Unsteady, arms out like wings, straight into Lila's lap. She cried. I laughed. He just giggled like the world was the softest, safest place. And in that moment, it was, we have a new life here. It's quiet, slow in a way I never knew I needed. We walk to the farmer's market on Saturdays. Lila teaches part-time art classes at the local library. I'm back in the classroom, teaching high school biology again. Different district, same worn-out textbooks, and 2 short lunch breaks. But it feels different now. Lighter. Every so often, the past scratches at the door. A blocked number. A mutual friend asking if we've thought about reconnecting. Once, we got a Christmas card with no signature. Just a photo of Grace's wedding, tucked inside like a warning or a dare. We didn't open it. We didn't need to. Because here's the truth I've learned. Not the easy kind, not the kind that fits on a bumper sticker, but the kind you earn one scar at a time. Sometimes you don't just lose your family. You survive them. And survival looks a lot like this. A house filled with laughter instead of guilt. A son who only knows love, not manipulation. A partner who held the line when everything threatened to fall apart. And mornings where I wake up knowing, without hesitation, that no one outside these walls controls our peace. My mother is alive. My sister too. But I don't grieve them anymore. I've already buried what needed to be buried. And in its place, we planted something real.